Okay, so in today's session, we are going to discuss how to integrate or how to connect Mulesoft to Salesforce, right? Um, so we'll see how to configure Mulesoft, API inside a Mulesoft so that it can establish connection to the Salesforce for various operations, right? So the concept or syntax that we are going to discuss, that will remain same, uh, whatever operation you want to perform in the Salesforce, right? So we'll see how to establish the connection. Now there are a couple of ways, right, that you can use to establish the connection from the Mulesoft to the Salesforce, right? And we discuss all of them. All right. And remember, this session is about to establish the connection from the Mulesoft to the Salesforce, right? Not the other way around. Not from the Salesforce to the Mulesoft. That we cover in another session. And again, if if you have watched or if you have followed our previous sessions on OAuth 2.0, then this tutorial is going to be very simple for you and it will be very easy for you to follow. But you haven't seen previous sessions, which was on OAuth 2.0, then maybe I will recommend you watch those first so that you understand the concept or the technology behind the today's implementation. All right, so just let me draw a diagram just so that we understand that what we are going to do, right? So um, we have Mule, right? I'm going to create a API inside the Mule which want to establish connection to Salesforce. Okay, so it will establish connection to the Salesforce. Okay, so that is what we will do. Okay, to implement the API, I will use my Anypoint Studio, right? And then I have also created a trial account on the Salesforce platform. So, which is very simple. You can also do it. All right. So let's start the implementation. In this one there is no much theory because we have already covered the OAuth 2.0 theory in our previous session. Okay, so here is my Anypoint Studio. Let me go and open a let's create a Mulesoft project. So this is test. Okay, so Salesforce connection test. So this is my project name. Here we are. This is our first flow. All right, now let me go ahead and create a listener. Okay, so I'm creating this listener to trigger my flow. Okay, let's this is my connector configuration, right? So that's fine, and this is connect. Okay, so this is going to be very simple API, very simple program, right? And as you know, I normally try to focus one thing or one concept at a time. So the focus or agenda for today's session is establish connection with the Salesforce and our understand or learn uh, various ways to establish connection from the Mule to the Salesforce, and try to understand the challenges, right, while establishing that connection, right. And then in the next sessions, in future sessions, we will understand how to perform different operations from the Mule to the Salesforce, but that will be the agenda for other sessions. But for this one, only to establish the connection, right? So that's it. So now, to establish the connection, right, so we have to perform some operation on the Salesforce, right. I mean, when I need to perform a operation, then only I will establish a connection, right. So let's do one thing. Let's run a query. So say suppose that is our requirement. We have a requirement where we want to perform a query on the Salesforce. Okay, so to perform the query, right, we will use the query operation, right, the query service. But before we can execute a query on the Salesforce, our Mule API has to connect to Salesforce, right? So that is what we are going to learn now. Okay, so so here you can see where we need to specify or write a query, right, which we want to execute. So we'll look into it in a moment, right. And but before that, we need to configure our connector, which is the Salesforce connector, which we have to configure here. Okay, now to configure that, you need to click on this plus button so that you can configure a connector. So if you come over here, you can see there are 1 2 3 4 5 ways which we can use to establish connection to the Salesforce. Now, based on your requirement or the security policy in your organization, you will choose one of this connection type. So we are going to see all of them except this one. All right, and but let's start with the basic authentication first. Okay, so this is the basic authentication, right. So in the basic authentication, we need to just provide username, password, and the security token. Okay, so the username is the user that you or your Salesforce team has created in the Salesforce application to establish the connection, right. So you need to get this information, actually all these three information: username, password, and the security token from the Salesforce team. Okay, but for now I'm going to demonstrate that how that works. Okay, so this is my Salesforce account, or the test Salesforce account, right. I use my user account, user ID, password to log in. But if you are new, right, you simply go to the login.salesforce.com, right, and you can just try for free, right, create a trial account, right. So that is what I did for myself, right. So I use my user ID, password, I mean the email address, to create this account. Okay, so or let me log out from this, right. Okay, so my user ID is this and the password is I'm entering. Okay, so this user ID, password, right, that is what we need to provide here, right. If I want to I'm sorry, if I want to use this user ID, password, right, but in the real scenario, your Salesforce team will create integration user ID password, right? That will be used for the Mulesoft to establish connection to the Salesforce, right? That will be a different user, and that user can be created from here, right? So you come over here, go here, users, right? And here you can create, I mean, your Salesforce team, or you can create the user, right? And actually, because this is trial account, so I can create only two accounts, two user accounts, right? So for this demonstration, I will use my own user ID password to establish the connection. Okay, so my username is all right, and the password is this one. Okay, now next is security token. Okay, now how we will get this security token, right? Let's look at that. Okay, so to get the security token, you need to go to your profile. You need to click on this icon, right? And then click on the setting, right? And once you will be here, you need to open the personal information menu or the tab, right? And then you need to click on the reset my security token. Okay, once you are on this screen, right, click on the reset security token, right? So once you click on that button, Salesforce platform will send a email to your registered email address with the security token, right? So I just now received an email with the security token. If I can show you here, right? So this is the email that I received just now, 0 minute ago, right? With the security token. So this is my security token that I'm going to use here. Okay, that's it. Now we are here. Okay, now in your case, this authorization URL, right, it may be different, right? So if it's different, you need to get this URL from your Salesforce team. Okay, so once you have entered all the details, you can click on the test connection to see if your API will able to establish connection to the Salesforce platform or not. Okay, so here you can see test connection successful. Okay, click on OK, and we can click OK. So our connection has been established. Using which method? Connection type is basic authentication. So using the basic authentication, we are able to connect Mule with the Salesforce, right? Now let's test the same thing further. Now we have tested this. Okay, so because I clicked on test connection, so that's fine. Okay, connection is successful. So it means our API will able to establish connection. Okay, now I need to get this query. Okay, so let's see how we can get that. Okay, so where you need to go is click here and go to the setup. Okay, now what I need is I need the query, right? Any simple query, right? So that I use it to test this connection, right? So in Salesforce, we can write SOQL, Salesforce Object Query Language, right? So if we want to write a query, or I mean, if we want to test a query, right, what we can do is we can go here, developer console, right, and to test it basically. All right. Okay. And then if you have a query, you can use that, right? You can directly use that here if you have received a query from your Salesforce team, right? But if you do not have, you can write your own query, right? So I have this query, I can use this one, right? Or let me explain that how you can write a new query, right? If you are testing this for the first time without the help of any Salesforce person, then what you need to do is you need to come on this screen, objects and field, click on the object manager, right? On this screen you can find all the objects, right, that is created on the Salesforce, right? And as I explained, we are going to write Salesforce query language, right? Salesforce object query language, right? So Salesforce object query language is like any SQL, right? The only difference is in case of the SQL, we use the object and the column names. In case of the SOQL, we use Salesforce objects, right, as our table name, and the field name as column field names of object as the column name, right? So let me give you an example, right? So I have created some custom objects here, but even if you do not have custom objects, right, you can still use it, right? So there will be at least one account object, right? So if you click on here, right, so this is my, okay, so you went to the object manager, that will show you all the objects that are set up, right? Then you can click on the accounts, right? So all Salesforce instances will have at least account object created by default, right? So this is your object name, right? And click on this fields and relationships, right, to find the fields names, okay, that is available inside that object. Okay, so say suppose I want to write a query on the account object with where I want to query name and account number. Okay, so how will write that query? Select name, okay, so and capital name, account number from account, right? Once you have your query, right, what you can do is you click on the execute, right? So if you do not have any syntax in your query, right, you will see the result of that query here at the top, right? So click here on execute to execute, and then you can see the result of that query here, right? So this is the first thing, right? And now remember one more thing. So if this is a custom object, right, custom objects have __ c as a suffix, right? So you will see in the custom objects like this, this guy will be c, or name will have underscore, and the account number will have _c, something like that, right? That indicate these are the custom objects. Inside the custom object you have custom fields, right? Something like that. So just remember that, right? It has actually, I think, double underscore, right? So that indicates these are the custom objects. So you may find this, so do not get surprised. But because account is not a custom object, it's a predefined object, so I don't need to use __ c. So it will be like this, and I'm able to execute the query. This query looks good. I will copy it and I will go here and I will going to place it in this section. Okay, so that's it. So my query operation is ready to connect to Salesforce and execute the query and get me the result. Okay, and after that I will use the payload component, right, to convert my payload to JSON so that I get that information in the browser, so that I can see that information in the browser, because the result from this operation will be a Java object, right? So Mulesoft will not able to send or pass that Java object so that it go to browser, right? That is why before it Mulesoft send the data to the browser, I'm going to convert it into JSON. Header. Okay. Let's click here so that we can see it properly. Okay. Done deal. Okay. So we are good to test this application. Okay, so let's test it. Right click and we're going to run as Mule application. We no longer need that anyways. Okay, connection. So my this thing URL is connection, not the connect. Connection. Okay, here you go. Right, so here you can see we have successfully queried the Salesforce. So if I can see this result here in my browser, it means my query service has successfully established connection to the Salesforce, and then it has executed the query and fetched the result, right? And then in the next operation, we just converted that Java object, which is written by the query operation, into JSON and send that payload back to the browser. And that is the reason I see this value, right? And I mean, I can explain that how this execution happen step by step, but that is not the agenda for this, because if we do it, we may distract from the main agenda. Okay, so yeah, so this is the one way to establish connection with the Salesforce from the Mule, right, where we use the basic authentication, right? And in basic authentication we use the username, password and the security token, right? um, so and let's just check one more thing, like what will happen if the value of this security token is not correct. So say suppose something like that. Right, let's see what error we get. Invalid username, password, security token, or user logged. Okay, so if we go to detail, in okay, so you need to remember this, right? Invalid login, right? So even if your security token is wrong, right, you will get this kind of error. Okay, and it is really important that we also understand that what kind of errors we will receive when specific value is not correct, right? And this is really important when we do different kind of different kind of this authentications, right? Because it gets a little bit confusing if we do not understand it. Okay, so let me remove this for now. So and if the security token is not correct, and we haven't configured it properly here or correctly here, then that kind of error we get. And let's see what will happen if we have wrong username. Okay, so the similar message it show, right? If any of detail is not correct, right? Whether it is the username, password, or the security token. So yeah, just remember that. Okay, now let's move on to the next one, which is our OAuth username and password. Okay, so this connection type or authentication or authorization type is related to OAuth 2.0, right? And I'm not going to explain that how what is OAuth 2.0 with the username password, or OAuth 2.0 client credential flow, right? We have discussed that in our previous videos. So you can go and check those details on theory behind this auth flow in those videos, right? So let's go ahead and configure this. Okay, so in this connection type, you can see we need to provide consumer key, consumer secret, username, password, and then the security token, right? So we have to create these we have to do something in the Salesforce to get these details, right? So let's do that. And but we know at least username, password, and the security token, right? So let's enter that. And the password is 91. Okay, and the security token, we have it, which is this. Okay, here's my security token. Okay, now I need to get the consumer key and the consumer secret, right? So let me get that. So for that, oops, I have to open browser again. Okay, and go to, and I have to go again to the Salesforce, right? So let's start from the start. So once you will log in, right, you may be, I mean, you will be somewhere on this screen. uh, some it will open some app, right? Default app. I do not remember what will the default app, right? So you will be some screen something like this, right? So what you need to do is you need to come over here and click on the setup, so that you go to the setup screens or setup application, right? So it will open a new page, something like that, right? So this is where we have all the option to customize the Salesforce, right? So this is the application, and this is where we customize it, you know. So what we need to do is we need to click on the apps and then click on the app manager. Okay, here we need to create a new app, right? I hope you remember. In this case, okay, let me give you some detail. So what is happening here? What is happening here is we have Salesforce, right? And then inside the Salesforce, inside the Salesforce platform, right? Somewhere, some way, right? We have both things. And let's say suppose this is our Mule API. Mule API, right? And this is Salesforce, right? So inside the Salesforce platform, you will have a authorization server, auth server, right? And resource owner, sorry, resource server, resource server. Okay, so your Mule API, right, before it access to the resources on the resource server, it need to connect to authorization server, right, to get the access token. It need to connect to authorization server, authenticate itself, and get the access token back from the authorization server, and then give that or pass that authorization server to the resource server to access the particular resource. In our case, we are actually accessing a API to execute a query, right? So that operation that you see internally, it basically makes an HTTP call, right? It accesses an API on the resource server, and that API basically helps to execute a query. Okay, that happens in internally inside that operation or this component or service that we are seeing on the that we are seeing here, this guy, right? Yeah, let's come back here. So yeah, so you remember that, right? We discussed, we call this guy as a client, right? And then we have other components here. So in the authorization server, if you remember the Okta one, we created an application in the Okta, right, for our client or for our application or for the person who want to establish the connection, right? That is where we define all the details related to this guy, right? Similarly, in the Salesforce or Salesforce as well, we have to define a something where we provide all the details related to this client, right? Like the who is this guy is, what is his user ID, what is his password, what scopes he has, and stuff like that. So now in the Salesforce, we are going to create a or set up a client, right? Or that we call in the Salesforce, we call it connected app, right? So you need to come here, come on this screen, app manager, and then click on the new connected app. Okay, so this is say suppose what we can test is query Mule test. Okay, I mean, this is just a name. You can name it whatever you want, what makes sense to you. Then the email address can be anything, right? I think it does not matter, but if matter, then we'll see. We'll we can come and change it. After that, that's it, I guess. Click on save. Okay, right. So we are here. No, I think I missed something. Let me go back and see. Enable auth. Yeah, here. Enable auth, right? We have to do this enable auth. Callback URL. So this is the URL. I mean, this URL will not be used, at least in this transaction. So we can specify some value. Okay, and then you can select specific scope, which is suggested by your Salesforce team, right? And these APIs or these scopes, right, will have a special meaning, and the Salesforce team will be able to tell you that which scope you need to use. But for this test, I'm going to select all of them. Okay, now we are here. No, this is not required, this is not required. Let's click on save. Okay, so it says that it may take up to 30 minutes for these changes to take effect or come into effect, right? So normally it does not take, but you should actually wait, right? Right, I mean, if it does not work, then I will wait, right? But we'll see, let's try it. So, but anyways, right, so this is my app that I created for Mule to connect to the Salesforce. So that's the connected app, right? Now if you see here, right, in my connector, I need to provide the consumer key and the consumer secret. All right, go over here. That so that information is here, right? So you need to copy the consumer key from here, enter here, and then click here for the consumer secret, right? So I should not show this to you, but it's okay. I mean, I'm going to delete that app anyways. Okay, so I think we are good to test this connection. Let's test it. So click on the test connection. Let's see if it's work or not. If it works, okay. If it does not work, we'll see. Okay, failed connection detail, invalid client ID. Okay, so it says invalid client ID, right? Now let me do one more configuration. Okay, you come over here, click on the manage, right? And then in the manage page, come to profile section. Okay, click on the manage profile and then select, I will select system administrator. You need to select the profile which is set up, or which has been assigned to the user which you are using to establish the connection. Means, let me explain this again. So we are using this username, right? So this user is set up in the Salesforce, right? So when this user is set up in the Salesforce, there is a profile, right? There is a profile that is associated with that user, right? So on this screen, we need to select that profile so that this particular profile get access to this connected app. Okay, so any user, as per my configuration, any user who has this profile assigned can be used to establish connection using this app. All right, so that's the point. Okay, now I have my profile assigned here. Let's test again one more time. Okay, so we have test connection successful, right? And let so that is important actually, right? Let me do that mistake again. Let me remove this manage profile. Oh, where I am, I want to remove this actually. I want to reproduce that error that we saw, and we want to make a note that what error we get in which scenario. Come over here and click on the test connection. Okay, let's look at the detail. I will copy it. There you go. And what happened? It's not copied. Okay, let me try one more time. Yeah, so it says 404 response body error invalid grant, and error description says authentication failure. Okay, so if your profile is not associated with the connected app, then you will get this error, authentication, this kind of error message, authentication failure. Okay, so this is important. Okay, now we know how to fix it. Let me fix it, and let's run this program one more time. Manage profile. System administrator. Click on the save. Right, so test connection successful. Okay, so this I think we are good. We are good with this one. Click on okay. Okay, save, and I think we can run this application again. Okay, so in Mule we know it, right? I mean, if you change something, it do hot deployment. So it's doing the hot deployment right now. Let's wait. Okay, so it's deployed again, the redeployed again actually. API is redeployed, so I don't need this, right? So let's access the API one more time, or send a request so that flow gets executed to the API. Okay, so you can see we can I'm still able to get the result, query result, right, from the Salesforce, which means my query operation is able to connect to Salesforce using the details that we have provided, and uh, able to execute the query and fetch the result. Okay, so that is one thing, right? So here you can see our OAuth client credential is working. So, and this is how we configure the OAuth client credential. Okay, now let's look at another one, which is Oauth Jwt. Okay, Oauth Jwt. So this one is little complex, but not very complex. Okay, so select this one, this authentication type, and then let's fill out all the detail here, right? So first one is consumer key. So do we have consumer key? Yes, we have the consumer key. You come over here, right? How to go back? Click on the setup. Okay, let's click on the app manager again, and the name of our app was query mule test, this guy here. Click on this button and click on the view, and this is my consumer key. Paste here consumer key, and then we're going to discuss this. We'll discuss this as well. We'll discuss this as well, and then we have the principal is username. Okay, and this that looks good. Okay, so far so good. Right, now we need three more things: the key store password and the certificate alias. Okay, let's discuss that. Right, so let me configure it, and then I will explain you the theory that what exactly this authorization type does. Right, and this is another flow. This is this grant type is actually different. We did not discuss in our previous session. So this is assertion grant type, right? And this work slightly differently than what we have discussed so far in the previous sessions, right? So we will have an overview, right? But let's configure this guy first. So what we are going to do is, so for this grant type we need a self-signed certificate. Okay, or we need a SSL certificate basically, right? And it can be a signed certificate, or it can be a self-signed certificate. It does not matter, right? But we need a certificate, public private key. In the Salesforce we have a way to create a self-signed certificate, right? So for this demonstration I'm going to use that self-signed certificate, but when you do this setup you can have the signed certificate from the CA as well, that can be used here, right? So let's check that certificate. Yeah, search the certificate and come to this screen, right? And this guy is under the security. Okay, security, and then secure certificate and the key management, right? So here you click on the create self-signed certificate. Okay, so you click on this, and then just give a name, query cert. Okay, I'm not going to write anything capital. Let's say query cert, right? I click here, and this is type self-signed certificate, and exportable private key, yes. Click on save, right? Once you come to this screen, click on the download certificate, right? So it will download your public key, right? So you are here, go back to that screen again. Okay, as you can see here, this is your certificate. Okay, now when you will be here, click on the export to key store. Okay, give a password, any password. Okay, this is just, it can be any password, but whatever password you will give here, you have to remember that. Okay, so let me, the password is test 1 2 3 4. So password is my test 1 2 3 4. Okay, and then click on the export. So what this will do is, it will create a key store, right? And I hope you are familiar with Java key stores. So key store is something where we can place lot of private certificates, right? So it's a kind of um, wallet or the purse, right, where you can place the private certificates, and that certificate can be used in the code so that your code can use the private certificate. All right, so I think that's it on this screen, right? Now we have a public certificate and we have the private certificate. Let's go back to our connected app that we have created for our client, which is this guy. Okay, and click on view edit. Click on edit. All right, come over here. Click on this use digital signature. Okay, and we need to select this certificate. Okay, query cert. All right, click on the open. Okay, that's it, which means, as you can see, I have configured my public certificate, right? The public certificate here in the Salesforce. Okay, and then click save. Okay, so it's saying it will take 10 minutes, so let's see how it goes, but that's fine. So that's the part number one. So we have configured the public certificate in the Salesforce. Next, we are going to use this key store in our AnyPoint Studio. So do you see here key store JKS? That is that key store that we just now extracted. So you click here, downloads, and that key store. We are good with this. Password is test 1 2 3 4. Okay, and the certificate alias. All right, certificate alias is nothing but the certificate name. Okay, and the certificate name was, I think, query cert. Query cert. Okay, so let's click on the test connection now. Let's see if it's work or not, or we are missing some configuration. Okay, so test connection is successful. Now I want you to remember one thing, right? This key store, if this key store has only one private certificate, then you don't need to give this certificate alias. Okay, but if that key store have multiple certificate, then you need to provide the certificate alias so that the Mule code know which certificate it need to use from this key store, right? Password, key store password need to be correct, and then certificate alias. Okay, if you are not sure what is your certificate alias name, then you can go to your it is go to this folder. Okay, and basically you can run the key store command, right? Key store -v -list, and then the minus key store, and then key store name. Use this command to find out the certificate alias name in the key store, right? And that is important. So if you have multiple, remember this thing, if you have multiple what we call this private certificate in your key store, then you have to use the certificate alias, otherwise you will not able to connect, right? And particularly in this scenario, in my scenario, right, because when I clicked on the export the key store, right, it has exported the private key of all these certificates in the key store, right? And I know that when this export happens, your Salesforce use the label as the certificate alias. So in this case, it will work, right? But if you do not know, you need to find it by running that key tool command. Okay, because if say suppose this certificate alias is not there, if you do not specify it, right, and if you run, see, you will get an error because you have multiple certificates here. Now it's working. This is strange. It should not work. Let's try one more time. Okay, so without certificate alias working, that's good, but I'm not sure why. I will check that. Okay, and then okay, now let's check this one. Say suppose um, we provide the incorrect consumer name. Let's see what happens. So it says you will get this kind of error. So status code remains same 400, and the response body is invalid client ID, right? And then the error description says client identifier invalid. So that makes sense because the consumer key is not correct here in this scenario, right? So invalid client identifier. All right, so this one now, let's, if I remove that, I should able to connect. Why it is now, that is not good. Now I have removed my consumer key is correct now. It should work now. Okay, client identifier invalid. Okay, so let me use this alias. Did I misplace something here? Okay, let me copy this guy again. Consumer key, let me copy the consumer key again. Manage view consumer key. Oh, okay, so 3. Oh, not this one. I need the consumer key from here. Query mule test. Okay, so this is also 3M. Oh, I think it was wrong. Control V. Yep. Okay, and if I remove it, it is still working. Let's see. Okay, and in this case, what will happen if, say suppose my store password is not correct? So let me enter some random value there. So you will get different error, and this error will be failed signing payload. Okay, so it failed to sign the payload, right? We'll discuss this, that why you are getting this error. Okay, so let me correct this, and it is test. I think it was, that is, it was. Okay. Okay, so this is, okay, we'll see it later. Okay, and what will happen if my username is not correct? Let's see what kind of error we get. User has not approved this consumer. Okay, user has not approved this consumer. So if I do not use the correct principal or correct username, okay, so you need to make sure that this information is correct, and these are the error you will get if specific information is not correct. Okay, and I want to show you one more thing that you may have to configure when you do this, right? Click on the manage, and click edit policy here. Yeah, so if in your environment, if you have this setting, all users may self authorize, then you need to select this one, admin approved user are pre-authorized, right? Otherwise it will not work, and you will get the same error that you that we saw last time. Okay, so remember this. Okay, now we are here. Okay, and this, we are able to establish connection without with this connection type Auth Jwt. So we are good, and we can say okay, and here Control S, come over here, and let's run it once. Let this sort deployment complete. Okay, so this is good. Let's send a request to this URL. Okay, so it's executed. I mean, we got the same response right from the Salesforce. So all our details are correct, and the query operation is able to connect to Salesforce and return the result. Right now, just very quickly about this OAuth Jwt, right? So this is assertion grant type, right? And it work little different than what we have discussed in our previous session, right? So in this case, in this one, what happens is so in this one, first of all, we do not have any resource owner, right? So we do not need any authorization, right? And let me open the old diagram. Maybe we can understand with this one in a much better way, right? So this is my this is client. So in our case, this is the query API, right? Query operation, or it is our Mulesoft API query, right? And then all this whole thing is in the Salesforce platform, right? This whole thing is inside the Salesforce platform, right? This is how it is. I believe you will agree to me. Okay, and let me take my pen. Okay, so in case of the assertion grant type, what happens, we use the SSL certificate, or we use a self-signed certificate, or a signed certificate from a CA authority, right? Public key is configured in the authorization server. Public key is configured here in the authorization server, and the private key is used by the client. Okay, your client generates a JSON object. Okay, and it will generate only one JSON object. Okay, and it will have some claims, okay, on this JSON object. After generating this JSON object, your client will use this certificate, this private certificate, right? And this is my, and here is it, auth will have my public certificate, right? Public certificate. Okay, so this is my JSON certificate, JSON data, right? Your client will use the private certificate to sign this JSON data. Okay, and it will be done in the same way, right? That the signing work in the with the Jwt token or the access token. Okay, so your JSON object will be converted into base 64, then client will create the hash key for it, and then that hash key will be encrypted with this private key, right? And then this the product that will create from that operation that I just now described is called the assertion, and this assertion will be sent to the token endpoint. Okay, it will be sent to the token endpoint. Let me confirm it. Yeah, it is sent to the token endpoint, not the auth endpoint. Okay, it will be sent to the token endpoint here. Now this token endpoint, what this token endpoint will do is it will validate that assertion. How it will validate? It validate the signature, right? By decrypting it and calculating the hash, right? If that assertion is authentic, if that assertion is correct, right, it will use the information inside that JSON object, right, and then it will create a access token directly for the client, right? Then this client will use that access token to access the protected resource. Okay, it will get the access token, right? And then your client will use this access token. Okay, it will use this access token to access the protected resource. Okay, so this is the assertion grant type, and this works little differently. Okay, that is the reason we had to use that public private key, public private certificate. Okay, so this is our third authorization type, or JWT. Okay, okay, so let's use another way, to connect Mule to the Salesforce. Okay, So for that, what we need to do is, let's go to our query operation and then click on the connector configuration, right? So this time we are going to use this method, auth SAML, right? So this is very similar to what we discussed in the Oauth Jwt. uh, and on very high level, the only difference is, in case of JWT, your client creates the um, assertion in the JSON format, and in case of OAuth SAML, client create that the assertion in the XML format, and then sign it and send it to the authorization server for uh, authentication, and to give it the access code back to the client. Okay, so we are going to use this one, OAuth SAML, right? So the consumer key, let's get the consumer key. So my consumer key is this. Okay, go here, let's place the consumer key. Okay, now here we have to, it's the same as I said, right? The similar concept. So we can use the same key store that we created for the Oauth Jwt, right? So I will go over here and downloads, and this is my key store, right? And the password was, I think, test 1234. Okay, and the certificate alias is not required, and then the principal is gmail.com. Okay, and then everything remains same. Okay, let's test this. Click on test connection. Let's see what happens. Okay, so connection is successful. So this is how this one work, right? So if I go and click on okay, now I can execute this API again. So here is my flow. All right, let's see if our deployment, okay, yeah, our deployment is working to redeploy my API. Okay, done. If I go back here and access the API, yep, so yeah, so it's working, right? So this time I connected my Mule API, or the query operation in my Mule flow using auth SAML authentication type with this connection type, right? Auth SAML, and this is how it works. So I mean, I have already demonstrated how you need to create the key store, right? So in our scenario, we created the key store from the Salesforce, right? But if you have a kind of signed certificate, so suppose you get that signed certificate from third party like the Verisign or the Thaward, right? You have to generate your key store and provide the path of that key store here, right? And again, and one more thing, I mean, if you place this key store file directly under the resources folder, you can give it give the path like this. You do not have to refer it from the um, download folder, right? So if you want to do that, just copy that this file, right? So something like this to in the resources folder. Okay, so the same thing, right? And then the password and everything remains same, right? So this is your OAuth SAML. Okay, so I hope there is no other question on this. Okay. Okay, so now we have one more type of connection in the Salesforce. Let's look into that one, and which is this guy, OAuth 2.0. Okay, so in OAuth 2.0 we have to provide all these configurations. Okay, so let me first enter all the fields and then we can discuss that how it will work, right? So here we have the consumer key and the consumer secret. So this is my consumer key. You copy it from here, enter it, reveal the secret. So here will be my consumer secret. All right, authorization URL, authorization token URL, that's fine. Scope is API, one of the scope that you have configured. Okay, so this is your just to give you the context. So we are going to apply OAuth 2.0 with auth authentication code grant type. Okay, or code flow, right? Where there will be a resource owner who will provide the authorization by authenticating himself to the client before client access the resource. And we have discussed this, right, in the our theory session in the OR 2.0 theory session. So you can refer those videos. Okay, so scope is API. I mean, it can be any scope that you have configured here, any scope. All right. What I have to do? Yep, sorry. Yep, come over here. Resource one ID is not required right now. Okay, okay. Now this is the any HTTP listener configuration. The callback is callback. All right, tab /AUT auth. This is the URL that you have to use for the authorization. Okay, so user will use this URL for the authorization. Once authorization is done, right, there will be auth dance. Okay, we will generate the access token. Okay, so in this one, the last field, which is really very important and confusing, is this one. So in case of if you are configuring this or testing this connection in the Anypoint Studio, you have to use a valid URL here, right, which will be used by the Salesforce to send you the client the code and the access token, right? And this value need to exactly match with callback URL, right? If it does not match, then your validation will fail, right? And you will not able to get the authentication code or the access token. Okay, so that value must match with this. Okay, so we will do this. Yeah, that's it. I think everything except this, everything looks good, right? And this cannot, I mean, we cannot test this configuration by clicking the test connection, right? We have to test it in a proper way, end to end way, right? Okay, so except that everything looks good. I think we are good. Okay, click on OK. save, right? And let's see if map dot, yeah, Mule redeploy my API. So it's redeploying. Let's wait. Okay, API is deployed successfully. We'll come over here, right? So if we say connection, okay, so if I hit that URL, my listener URL, right, it will try to try to execute this operation, right? So if it do this, it will get this error, and the error is OAuth authorization dance not yet performed for the resource owner ID, and the resource owner ID is null right now. Okay, so we need to perform the auth dance, right? Which means we need to, or user, someone need to provide the authorization before that query component access connect to the Salesforce and execute the query. Okay, so someone need to provide the authentic authorization so that your Mule get the access token and store it for further use. Okay, so to authenticate we have to use http localhost 8081 auth, right? So this auth is from our this is what we have configured. So whatever you have configured here, that will be your authorization URL. So whatever you will configure here. Okay, okay, successfully received the access token. Okay, it has received the access token, and actually reason behind that, because I'm already logged in with on the Salesforce in this browser. That is why I did not get what we call that page where I have to enter my user ID password, right? If I go here and connect now, it will work, right? But actually that is the thing, right? If you see here, that is where Salesforce has written the code. You can see here, right? The access code, I mean auth code. Hmm. Let me use this once. http colon. So I'm using different browser just to check, maybe I will get the user the skin to enter the user ID password here. Auth. Yeah, right. So user has to, or principal has to authorize himself, right? So I click on enter my user ID password. Okay, the verification code. Okay, I got the verification code. Verification code is this. Okay, successfully retrieve the access token. Okay, so your Salesforce has sent the access token. Now this token has also received to our Mule API. The Mule API will store it in the object store. So whenever I access the API, my actual API, right, it will use that access token to connect to Salesforce, right? So in this case, we have full or dance, because this is code flow. Okay, or or the authorization code grant type. Okay, So this is how we can connect to uh, connect to the Salesforce.